My name is Adriana Hernandez. I am the program manager with Educational Services at IVROP. And on behalf of Imperial Valley Regional Occupational Program and UC Farm Smart, our partners in this event, we would like to welcome you and thank you for attending the first session of the fourth annual Imperial Valley Youth Ag Summit, the first virtual one that we've done. Although this year it looks different, the goal is the same, the goal of connecting ag students to industry. Um, so we hope that you will continue to participate during the next two sessions, which will be the virtual tours. And we will add the flyer as a reminder to those sessions. They will continue to be on Wednesdays at the same time at 1:30 at the same Zoom link. So without further ado, I would like to present the moderator for today's industry panel Q&A, Brea Mohamed. Thank you very much for your support.
Thank you so much, Adriana, for the introduction. I am extremely happy to be here today with all of you and to have the opportunity to help you learn from all three of our great panelists. I am an Imperial Valley native myself and was very involved with FFA throughout high school, but I never had this Youth Ag Summit in my day, so don't take this opportunity for granted. IVROP and FarmSmart have done a great job getting this all coordinated for you guys. So I am excited for what's in store. Before we get started today, let's meet our three panelists. Daren, let's start with you. Can you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, my name is Daren Van Dyke, and I'm currently the Director of Marketing at Five Crowns Marketing. Originally, I was from a family farm in Blythe, California. And then I went to Cal Poly, San Luis Obispo. I graduated in ag business with a marketing concentration. And then I've been with the Coles family Five Crowns for the last 26 years. Before that, I was with Christopher Ranch Garlic Company in Gilroy, California for 6 years before that, as well as having my own business. But yeah, I've been involved in ag marketing, for a long time. And even when I was in school, I was a member of a national championship. They call it the NAMA, National Agri Marketing Association. We were national champs for the country I was a member of that team. So, just a little scholastic thing there.
Great. Thank you so much, Daren. Next, Sarah, would you mind introducing yourself?
Thank you so much, Brea and Mrs. Collins and everyone at IVROP for inviting me today. My name is Sarah Jane Abatti. I grew up in Holtville, California. I actually went to school with Mr. Hawk. He and I graduated from the same class in, dare I say, 2009. Let's see, my folks are farmers there in the Valley. I have two younger brothers that some of the students may know, Ben and Braden. They're back home farming. And my little sister is on the call, which is great because she was going to be in trouble if she wasn't. Miss Audrey Rose is a senior at Holtville High School. After high school, I went to Kansas State University where I studied animal science, and I didn't know what I wanted to do quite then, but I eventually figured it out. I went on to get my master's at Texas A&M Kingsville in Kingsville, Texas, and studied ruminant nutrition there on the King Ranch. Did some studies with some cannulated steers and really set me up for what I do now. I went on to work in the dairy industry as a nutritionist and sales consultant before I found the job that I work in now, that I consider to be my absolute dream job. I mean, who doesn't want to work with cows and cowboys every day? But now I am currently working for a large feed company here in West Texas called High Pro Feeds, and I am a cow-calf nutritionist. So I work on large ranches, cows that are out on rangeland. I put together their diets and match the best products that we offer to facilitate the ranchers' performance goals and things like that from an economic standpoint. And just to give you guys an idea of where I live in a little town called Happy, Texas. And it is right there at the very tip top of Texas. But I always like getting invited back to these things. I don't live in the Valley, but I try to give back as much as I can. So thank you guys for having me so much.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And then our last panelist, Daniel, would you mind introducing yourself, please?
Hello, everyone. I'm Daniel Hawk. I did graduate with Sarah, Holtville High School, 2009. It feels a while ago now. After high school, I wasn't sure exactly what I was going to do. I ended up going and getting a mechanical engineering degree in college. And after that, I went to work for John Deere for a couple of years, designing several products there, like high cycle sprayers, mostly tractors, that kind of stuff. And after I finished with John Deere, I decided I wanted to come back to the farm. And I've been here now as a grower for Horizon Farms, Horizon Organics, and Hawk Brothers, kind of a little conglomeration of companies. I've been a grower here for about 4.5 years now. And so brings me kind of full circle from not sure I was going to be an ag all the way back around to getting sucked back into the valley. So here I am, and I'm here to stay.
Great. Thank you, Daniel, and thank you to all three of our panelists. So just a little explanation of how today is going to work for everyone. We have 3 questions that we will spend the first 15 minutes on with our 3 panelists, just some general questions to get an idea of their thoughts on the industry and their background and get some of their perspective. And then we will open it up for questions from the students, any specific questions that you have for specific panelists or for all 3 of them. I believe that we'll be monitoring the chat as well. So we'll be monitoring the chat, but there will be an opportunity for the students to turn on their cameras at the end and ask questions orally, or if you're more comfortable, you can ask questions via the chat as well. So to start off, Daniel, let's give you the first question if you don't mind. So there seems to be a new obstacle every day that the ag industry seems to face, and we're constantly adapting so that we can continue to feed the nation and the world. What is a major ag issue impacting your area of the industry, and how do you face that challenge?
I think it's a hard thing to answer right away, because where do I start? Like you're saying, it seems like ag seems to face the issues first in a lot of ways, because we tend to be loaded with people, not really an option to work from home. I think COVID is one of the major issues we're facing right now, trying to learn how to deal with, how to adapt. I think the major ways that COVID has kind of affected us is losing qualified employees. Every operation has employees that works for it that are very important and integral to the operation of the company. And when the way that looks on a farm is, say you have a tractor foreman or your irrigation foreman, and he gets COVID, and that's a kind of a position within your company that you don't just have somebody that can fill very easily right away. It requires a lot of training and time and effort. And so I think losing qualified employees, experienced employees, is a major challenge, trying to keep your operation safe, trying to keep it running smoothly. It's hard to do without a link in that chain. Most farming operations, the people who work for them are almost like family. You work together 10 to 12 hours a day, and you're trying to get through everything. And all of a sudden, when you lose them, that can be really tough. Another thing is accommodating for social distancing. Farming's been around for a long time, but we're also beyond just growers. We also ship and pack our own product as well. So we don't just grow and hand over to people like Daren to sell we also are a packing facility. We have our own packing facility. We ship our own onions. We sell our own onions. We have our whole facility here, and it's quite time intensive to be able to move all these places that have had people together for such a long period of time, to adjust your equipment to be accommodating to social distancing. And it's just kind of it's a mess, and we're slowly getting better at it, but it's still a major challenge that we're facing this year in particular. And not to mention, one more thing I think that we're facing in a large way is the labor cost of California versus Arizona or other places. Just a simple hike in minimum wage doesn't seem like very much, but coupled with great unemployment benefits from COVID, sometimes finding the labor can be quite difficult. And so those are the two major challenges that I see that I'm dealing with on a day-to-day basis, at least on the grower side, on the packing side, just dealing with the COVID issue and with the resulting labor problems tends to be the major issues that I face.
Thank you, Daniel. And definitely COVID hit right when you guys were when Imperial Valley was just about to start onion season. So I remember thinking, and melons, I remember all of our farmers starting to harvest and trying to figure out how to adapt their practices to protect our employees. Like you said, our employees really are our family, and we did everything we could to make sure that they stayed safe and continue to do so. And COVID itself gives us a new challenge every day for our ag industry, definitely. Thank you for your perspective. Sarah, would you have anything to add from your area of the industry?
Sure. From the feed milling side, I do work for a feed company, although I'm not a salesman. I would echo Daniel's thoughts and concerns about finding labor and trying to social distance when you do have to have very skilled people who are trained to make a certain product leave. We've had to shut down entire mills. That's roughly 20 to 30 tons of feed a day that doesn't go out. That's ranchers without feed in their bins. Those are cows going hungry, literally, because we had to shut down the mill. We currently have a mill that's completely shut down. That's 30 people who came down with COVID. So we've done everything right, but it just takes one person to come back to work, kind of ruin it for everybody. We actually had our mill manager pass away this year, 45 years. That's very suddenly boots that you have to fill, and you lose a lot of your efficiencies. And we have lost a lot of our efficiencies all across the ag industry this year because of everything that's happening. But as far as the beef industry specifically, so I know that ranching isn't really something the Imperial Valley may be as familiar with as out in West Texas, but it affects the feedlot industry just the same. Right now in Texas, we're in a drought. I understand it's raining there at home. So we are coming off, hopefully, of a 10-year drought. Droughts are very cyclical, and droughts are always tough because ranchers have to get around to selling their cattle. They don't grow enough grass. Out here, everything is dependent on the rain. Nothing is irrigated. That's not really, it is somewhat, there's farms in Texas, but you don't irrigate pasture land for cows. That's not a thing. So when there's no rain, you have to sell your cows. But with the pandemic, one of the chain of effects that happened was grocery stores started limiting you on how much beef you could buy at the grocery store, right? So that backed up the beef, which I could go on forever about packing houses, and I don't mean like Daniel's, I mean slaughterhouses, okay, packing houses. The packing houses really took advantage of that because they had all of this beef in cold storage, right? So there was never a shortage of beef during the pandemic. That never happened, okay? But the person who paid for it the most was the rancher, because the packing house wouldn't take anymore, and they had to shut down somewhat because of social distancing stuff. We have lots of packing houses here in Texas, here specifically in the Amarillo area, and it was a nightmare. They were one of our main hot spots. So ultimately, they quit buying beef. The cattle stayed in the feedlot a lot longer, and those guys that were running the feed yards, they lost a lot of money by keeping cattle for 150 days. Typically you may keep a beef cow max 120 days. Holsteins, I know it's a little bit longer. They have a longer growth period, but they're just feeding these cattle. What are they going to do? Go out and shoot them all dead? No, they're just going to keep them and wait until the packing houses open back up. And so that means the feed yards aren't buying any cattle. The cattle that they do buy, supply and demand, we're bringing 50 cents less than what they normally would have. It's important to remember going through life that the Imperial Valley stock show, as generous as it is not remotely reality when it comes to beef cattle prices. Okay, most of the time in a good year, people will sell 600 weight steers, which are the ideal kind of weight to enter a feed yard, at about maybe $1.50, $1.75, depending on how healthy they are, where they came from, how many are in the group. Okay. So ranchers are now dealing with only getting $1.10, $1.15, maybe sometimes $1.25 for calves that are worth so much more. And the packers are making $800 a head margin, where usually they'll make $40 to $80 a head on margin. Okay. All of that being said, we have ranchers who are getting rid of cattle because they can't, they don't have enough grass for them because we're in a drought, very severe drought this year. It was drier this year than it was last year, okay? The cattle that they're selling aren't bringing near as much money. They won't be able to take that money and rebuy the same number of head next year. And on top of all of that, because we stopped driving, there was not as much ethanol being produced, thus not as much DDGs being produced. So supply and demand again, DDGs are a byproduct. It's just dried distillers grain, great feed product. So the cattle that they do keep, it's taking an enormous amount of money to feed them. So it's a very, very tough year. While social distancing may be easy for cowboys because they're the only person out there, that's fine. But it has been a very, very, very hard, long year for our ranchers. They just can't win this year.
Thank you, Sarah. I think that you gave a great, some great light to what's going on, most definitely. Daren, real quickly, would you have anything to add, perhaps maybe from the food safety side or changing consumer demands, kind of from your area of expertise?
Well, I think from our standpoint, and you know, we're actually a grower, fully integrated grower, packer, shipper, packer. You know, we basically have it all, from basically planting the seed in the ground to actually putting it in, distributing it to market. I would like to say that definitely the COVID thing, absolutely. I think I'll give you a snapshot of two different items. Number one, asparagus. We're big asparagus people. We have our main grower in Mexico. It's the worst asparagus market we've ever seen. And mainly because you had export is a big buyer, food service is a big buyer. When those sales got taken away from the asparagus producers, the market just took a dump. It's the worst market we've ever seen. Conversely, we're probably the largest corn growers in the West, or we are the largest corn growers in the Western United States. Corn, every one of our customers had to be up between 40 and 50%. We saw insane increases, you know, from consumer habits, from basically people being stuck at home. And since they're not going out, corn is the number one item for kids, and people are trying to make their kids happy, and the family meal basically becomes the entertainment. So unfortunately, if you had food service people, and I really feel for, you know, for the restaurateurs, you know, I mean, I worked in food service and I cater and stuff like that too as a hobby, but you really feel for those family businesses and those operators that are just getting, to me, totally screwed. And this is going to put a lot of people out of business. The COVID, the labor thing, what he said was very, very true. At our processing plant, we were losing people left and right. Your cost to harvest a unit went way up because, first of all, you had less people to deal with. You had to offer cash bonuses to people to get them to come, to get them to stay. And then you had, as he said, key people that you rely upon. And, you know, some of them just said, hey, that's too lucrative for me not to work, and it's too safe. So all those things come into play. And I would say, I think that's the one we're going to address here. But I would say, to me, a challenge that I really see, which also translates to all these young people here, is the lack of young people willing to work to come into agriculture. I see a lot of, in fact, we were up at a meeting with a Japanese family up in Yakima, Washington, that basically is looking to get out. None of the younger generation wants to come in. They don't want to take over the farm. They don't want to put in the work. They don't want to do all that. I see for myself and who we hire here, it's very difficult to find young people that have the drive and the passion and the work ethic to really jump in and do this business. So what is also a problem, also to me, represents an opportunity for somebody that's willing to put in the work and do it. Because one thing, being in retail, we always, you know, we've been through different crashes and stuff like this. And I think it's really interesting about the beef. I thought, man, beef was so short, you know, that I didn't realize it was kind of stuck in the middle. But I think that normally food is one of those things that is, you're always going to make it through the at worst times in the economy. People got to eat. You know, if you're in construction, Or if you're like, and you did the housing crash of 2007, you know, all of a sudden there was no jobs, no houses, things tanked, mortgages, you know, this and that. One thing about food, people always have to eat. But when times are tough, they go to the grocery store and they don't go to a restaurant. So that in itself, no matter what turbulent times you're facing, I think to the younger generation, that's an opportunity. And if you do it well, it's a good, it's safe opportunity with not enough competition that I think there's going to be good jobs opening up for this next generation.
Thank you, Daren. And that is a perfect transition into my second question I have for you guys. You hit the nail on the head. There was an ag census done in 2017, and throughout America, what we saw was only about 10% of ag producers were under the age of 35. So there definitely is a really large opportunity for young people in agriculture. The average age of a farmer is 57 and a half in America. So there's some opportunities for young people who are interested in ag. Similarly, we're seeing a lot of opportunities for females in agriculture as well. About 2/3 of producers are female, which is an increase. We're seeing more and more women get involved in agriculture. So there's definitely some opportunity. And so that's my second question for the panel. And Sarah, let's start with you. What challenges and opportunities do you think face both women and young people who are wanting to become involved in the agriculture industry?
Sure, and I'll start with challenges facing young people as a whole, because I've never been turned down because I was a woman as far as jobs go. But I have been turned down because I was too young, okay? So you can't graduate from college and have 30 years of experience. That's just not how life works. And there are so many opportunities. I'm sure all of us could sit here for hours talking about all the different facets of agriculture that you can work in. It's not just one. I mean, it is a big umbrella, but there's so many different pathways that you can take and study different things. However, one of the biggest challenges that young people face, in my opinion, is themselves. I see a lot of young people that are interested, but they don't go for it, and they don't know how to go for it. It can be very intimidating, especially for women entering into an industry that is mostly men, okay? There are still some things that women can't do necessarily, and I'll get into that here in just a minute. But my best advice to young people would be ask all of the questions. There are no stupid questions. There's only people who make you feel stupid for asking questions. And those people do not have teaching hearts. You shouldn't be asking them questions in the first place, okay? You go out and you find your mentor. You do whatever it takes. You hunt people down. It doesn't matter who you know, what your last name is, where you came from. It all depends on who you meet. And you have to do that for yourself, okay? That's the best thing I can do is just, you have to ask questions. I don't think any of our panelists or our teachers here or any of the IVROP folks are going to make you feel dumb today. That's not what this is about. So don't worry, like ask the dumb question, okay? Just if you want the information, most of the time when you ask the question, you're going to get more than what you bargained for. I ask lots of questions all the time, and I ask questions when I'm confused or lost. And I usually get way more information than what I bargained for, and it helps me put the pieces of the puzzle together, okay? As far as women in ag, I will say that because there is a slightly lower age group now, so most of the people I work with are between 30 and 50, and I've approached that age group, but 25 is not that far off either when I was much younger. And it's never been about me being a woman. It was always about me being young. And the men in that age group that make up the majority of the clients that we have daughters who have gone to college. They're used to women working in the same facets of men. So blatant sexism isn't something I've run into, but sexual harassment is. And the best piece of advice I can give you is in a professional setting, if someone wants to come on to you, okay, you say, look, I'm here to work. How about you? That's the best thing. I've used that many times. I was very afraid the first time I used it, and it does happen a lot. And it's just, I mean, it's really gross. But there's also things, women, that we can do to prevent things. Sometimes I can do nothing wrong and questions would still be raised. Okay, so if I'm a seed salesman, I am not going, even if it's totally harmless, and I've known Daniel for years, I am not going to go sit in a tractor with a married man and drive around and try to sell him feed. I am not going to take Daniel out to dinner just by myself. Always invite the wife, first of all. And if you're dealing with the wife, hell, invite the husband, you know, whatever. But you don't put yourself, there's some things like that men can do. Like Daren could totally get in a tractor and drive around with Dan if that's the only 10 minutes they had together that day, right? Women, just don't put yourself in a position to do that. You have to, you know, don't go looking for trouble, but you also don't need to be instigating anything either. And that's just the unfortunate truth. And it's just better avoided. That's all I have on that.
Thank you, Sarah. Let's get to our third preset question, and then we'll open it up for any questions from the students. Daniel, this one's for you. What opportunities do you see that are available in agriculture, and what tips do you have for anyone who's interested in getting involved with ag?
Great question. You know, becoming a grower like me is something that can be quite difficult to do, because oftentimes you have to be born into it to get the opportunity, because just starting with nothing, with no former experience and not having a family that's involved in farming, becoming a grower is almost impossible. I mean, some people have done it. Some people have gone to work for somebody and then worked their way up the ranks and started a farm on their own. And it's tough. I mean, I'm not going to lie, the agriculture industry is tough to break into sometimes, but you also have to look at the benefits of working in ag as well. And I think a great way to break into ag is really through technology. You know, I have a little bit of a different perspective because I did go and get my engineering degree and go work for a company for a few years. And, you know, don't think that agriculture is a farmer dressed in standing out in his field. He's got a pitchfork and he's just working like a dog all day. That's not necessarily what agriculture is. There's so many different facets of it to get involved in that maybe a lot of people don't even understand. You know, agriculture 100 years ago involved a lot more people than it does now. Almost probably 40% of the population worked in agriculture 100 years ago. Now it's 2% of the population that works in agriculture, somewhere around there. Don't quote me on those numbers, but it's something like that. Just the number of people. And why is that? Why has the number of people that are in ag dropped? The reason why is because technology in agriculture has exploded. And I think that getting involved in technology, if you're somebody who thinks they want to go to school and get a mathematician, you know, become a mathematician, if they want to go to school, and there's opportunities like that in agriculture. So don't think that there's a certain path for you to get involved in ag, because there's a lot of creative ways to get involved in ag, and the field is a lot larger than you would even assume. I mean, like, there's sales involved, like Daren. There's even like a mill situation like Sarah. These are all agricultural things. On my side of it, there's people like me who run packing sheds, and that is far more technical than it even is, you know, having to do with agriculture. I have the awesome ability to run a packing shed and use my mechanical mind, but also I also have the great privilege to grow crops, to oversee planting, to oversee watering of the plants. I mean, it's a great thing. It's probably the best job in the world. Just because I don't really have a boss. The plant is my boss, and it tells me what to do. And sometimes he's pretty demanding, but the benefits of just the life of ag is one that can far outweigh all the hard work. Because it'd be a falsity of me to tell you that agriculture is the easiest thing. It's not. It's a lot of hard work. It really is, but it's something that is extremely rewarding. And I would just say, like Daren, just reiterate that if you're willing to go out there and put out the work and to get involved and to try something like agriculture, sure, it can be very risky, can be a lot of work, but the rewards are definitely worth it. And I'm a young person myself, and I didn't initially go into agriculture because I didn't think there was room for me on our family farm until a couple things shifted around and I came back. But ultimately, never take ag for granted, and don't take it out of your as far as what you're looking to do when you graduate. Don't think that ag doesn't have anything to offer you, because it does.
Thank you. Greatly said, Daniel. So now we are going to be opening up for questions from any of the students. At this time, feel free to turn on your cameras and
I didn't
ask,
get my turn in that section.
what's that?
I said I didn't get my turn in either of the last two sections. I'm getting left out. What's up?
We'll ask you the next ones. I just wanted to get to, do you have anything, Dying, that you want to add to those? We're
Just
kind
real
of 7
quick,
minutes.
I wanted to get this in.
Yeah.
To Daniel's point.
Yep.
There's a million different jobs in ag. A million. You could be a computer guy. You could be a chemist. You could be a grower. You could be anything. We have Cameron Tate, who's our food safety director, was harvesting crops in the field when one of our foremen just said, hey, here's a kid. He's probably the only white kid on the crew, but he's busting his butt. And now he's our food safety director. Came up from absolutely nothing. That's the best thing about ag. And you're talking about people here, salt of the earth people that are very family oriented, very, work ethic oriented and all of that. And I just think that for anybody up there, for this younger generation, I mean, to me, I hire people, and you know what? I was a college guy, but I'm not sold on it. I want to see somebody who wants to bust butt, somebody who wants to work. And if you think you don't have what it takes and you're not a school guy, well, get out there, and there's a lot of opportunities, and the door's wide open for you to work your way up. That's the only thing I wanted to really add. It really is, a very gratifying business. Is it hard? Absolutely, it's hard. But for the younger generation, the door is absolutely wide open. So that's it. And I feel better.
Thank you. That was really great to add. I appreciate you chiming in. And I do see that we have a question in the chat directly for you, Daren. So do you guys want to start with people who wanted to ask questions orally, or would you like me to kind of go through a couple of these questions we have in the chat first?
You can start with that question in the chat for Daren, and then
Perfect.
We can go on to letting people unmute themselves.
Okay. So Daren, we have a question for you here that says, what's your process of thinking when thinking up new marketing and sales strategies?
Well, we in ag, and again, we don't sell really directly to the consumer. We sell through different channels of distribution. Like for 5 Crowns Marketing, we're probably 90% direct retail, which means we sell to, Stater Brothers, to Albertsons, to Safeway, to people like that. We do a little bit of export, a little bit of food service, but really that's our bread and butter. When you as a consumer go shop at the store for an item, typically what happens is if it's lettuce or whatever, you go to the store, and if there's a head of lettuce and it looks good, you're going to pick it up. So our chances to really influence the consumer, really what our strategy has been is really to develop superior seed varieties, superior taste profiles, to really kind of do a better job, and then do kind of a pull through. Like we'll get on our social media or on our website or try to give information about it. But really, if we don't get it in front of the consumer to the stores, then our chances are really limited. So in looking at that, I always take a look at a new variety or a new item. I go, is it going to stand out in a very crowded, produce section? Does it have a chance to be successful? I go talk to different retailers across the country and say, hey, is this something that would fit? Do you see a spot for it? I really try to do a lot of homework ahead of time and a lot of testing. And then naturally, if it doesn't produce, if you can't get a good seed and it doesn't produce well, you've got to get the units, or no matter what, it's not going to be profitable. So, there's a lot of work that goes into it, but mainly it's like a big jigsaw puzzle. If you see something that has, potential, then you try to go about, and then you say, okay, my part of it is the creative side too. So I try to, how do we creatively market this? How do we influence the consumer? How do we get more space on the shelf? Because that's really your selling spot. So if that answers that.
Yes, thank you, Daren. Let's see, and we have another question related to COVID-19 here in the chat. COVID-19 has impacted many areas, aspects of the ag industry. From an employment readiness standpoint, are there any new work skills that you desire from candidates? And then thinking down the road, when things start to look somewhat normal, do you anticipate any workforce challenges, recruitment, hiring, and what about the emotional toll and response? So let's start this one. Sarah, would you like to take this one on?
You know, I don't do a lot of hiring. I don't think I have a lot to contribute to that. Just when your dream job, like be prepared for your dream job to come up at any minute and be prepared to work. Where we all have to pay our dues. We're still, I mean, I'm still paying my dues. So I don't have a lot to add to that one. I'm sorry, I'm not a hiring manager.
Daren or Daniel, do you have any thoughts on, I guess, aspects that we've seen happen with COVID-19 that we think are going to follow us into the future?
I can speak a little bit to that. As I was saying earlier with those challenges, I think that what we saw a year ago is going to be a little bit of a drop in the bucket compared to what we're going to see in a few months from now. And what I mean is whenever we pick back up to onions and things, I think, and melons, and we get into that season, we're going to see a lot of people understand a lot of what COVID is. But the issue is that the vaccine hasn't really been rolled out quickly enough. And then on top of that, the disease is out there among a lot larger number. I mean, we almost had nobody get sick a year ago. And we had 300 people working for us at one time in pretty close quarters. And so I really feel like being prepared and being ready this year is going to be something that we're going to have to do. And as far as finding employees to help us, I think that we will be able to, but I think the hard part is going to be the challenges. I think are just going to be a lot larger in keeping everybody healthy this go around, just because I believe that a higher number of the population have been infected. And so I believe that just transmission is going to be a lot easier. And so we're really trying to work around the clock to figure out what we can do to keep everybody safe. And not only that, be sensitive to people's needs in this time. You know, COVID hits people in different ways. Some people have lost relatives, some people have lost even family members that are very close to them. And so I think that it's just going to be a major challenge going forward, but I think we'll be able to survive it. But it's definitely going to be one of those things where we're going to have to take it one day at a time and see how it plays out. Because I don't know if anybody can predict what's going to happen exactly, but we're just going to have to, you know, the thing about ag is it doesn't stop. Whether it's raining or whether people get sick, you know, it's just one of those things where the plants are your boss and they don't care what day it is, and they don't care if you're sick either, you know, and they're so fragile that, and I think that's what really drives you know, they don't care if it's Christmas when they need water. And it's just one of those things that continuously drives agriculture. And I think that we will overcome it, but it's going to be a tough challenge.
I think as far as hiring, you know, for me, I'm not in the plant or with the harvesting crews or anything like that. I just see kind of the after effects of it. But I would say for anybody young, what you know, and I do hire, what I look for is I look for passion, hustle, work ethic. I love somebody that asks a lot of questions, because, you know, if you walk in and you think you know it all, it automatically turns me off. But I think with this, everything that's going on is going to do nothing but open up the opportunities. From what I see, a big part of being a family farm and a family owned company, you know, we're not a conglomerate, we're owned by a family, is the loyalty factor, the look, you know, hey, COVID gave a lot of people, not that it was legit or people weren't afraid to be in spaces or whatever, but the bottom line is it was so lucrative not to work that even like my children I'm divorced, they live in Northern California, they both work in retail stores. I told them, look, your company needs you. Be safe, be careful, do your due diligence. But you know what? When you stick it out and don't blow something off, trust me, we as employers, Daniel, I'm sure you know who those guys are and who they aren't, but one thing we appreciate is the people that stick with you in times of needs. And those are the people that are going to get promoted and advanced. So that's one of the big things I saw come out of this. You had people that surprised you, and then both ways. Some you thought, oh, this person was going to be super loyal, this, that. And then another person that you thought, oh, he's gonna be the first one out of here, and yet he wasn't. So it's just interesting. I think it goes to, the person's, moral and ethical makeup. But to me, loyalty is a big part of agriculture, in my opinion.
Most definitely. Thank you, Daren. I mean, I think that goes back to Daniel's comment earlier, where our employees are our families. And so that loyalty does have a lot of weight, and employers definitely see when you're a hard worker. So that shows, and don't ever think that putting in that extra time and putting in that extra effort goes unnoticed, because it definitely does not. Let's see, let's go through the chat and see if we have any questions we have not gotten. And if you guys want to raise your hands too, if you were wanting to ask a question, I can't see everyone to see if anyone was wanting to ask a question, unmute themselves and ask a question, but perhaps those from IVROP can help me out in case you see anyone that's looking like they wanted to ask something. Here's one. What would you say is one of the most difficult things about obtaining a job in ag? Sarah, do you have any thoughts on that one?
Well, it's not hard to find a job in ag. It's just, is it a job you want to do? Okay. I think that anytime you're pursuing, even if you've narrowed it down to just a couple of things that you think you want to do, for example, myself, okay. I didn't want to be a veterinarian. I didn't know I didn't want to be a veterinarian. How about that? Till I got to college and I discovered that you can only work in nutrition or reproductive or genetics or breeding, genomics, the environmental side. There's all of these different things that fall under the umbrella of like, okay, loves animals, right? Once you've kind of narrowed that down to what you feel like you want to do, the hardest part isn't going to be getting the job. Okay. You need to be experienced, as you should for any job. You need to be a little more outstanding than any of the other applicants, of course, and that is a person by person basis. I can't tell you how to be necessarily, but you need to keep in mind 3 things: where you want to live, what you want to do, and how much money you want to make. And those 3 things will change levels. Okay. You could work a job you hate, but they pay you a lot. You're like, I'm going to do that job. Right. Okay. Then there's, where do you live? Okay. For me, I never really got homesick until I landed in Kingsville, Texas. And I said, this is not for me. So where I lived was the second most important thing. First, of course, I had to work with cows. I didn't get my dream job coming out of college. I worked for the dairy industry because I knew I needed more experience. So I worked on a very, very detailed side of nutrition for several years. And then I took that and I thought I was going to have to create my dream job myself, but I knew I needed that experience. So I took a job I didn't necessarily love. I knew I wasn't going to like love it. I thoroughly enjoyed it. So works with cows, lives in Texas, and then pay was kind of where I was at. And I had other job offers doing less interesting things for more money than the first job I had out of college. I don't regret not taking those jobs, but I'm very thankful that I set myself up to learn as opposed to seeking that dream job right out of college. Okay. And not everyone gets their dream job. And sometimes your dreams change, and that's okay. Again, your greatest obstacle is going to be yourself, and teaching yourself as much as possible. You will learn much more outside of the classroom than you do inside of the classroom. And you will learn more faster with asking questions. And the more you get used to asking questions, guys, the easier it comes and the better the questions become too. And that's always very impressive. When you get really good at asking questions, someone like Daniel or Daren will see that and go, that kid wants to learn. That kid wants to be here. They're very passionate. They obviously have some knowledge and they know how to obtain the information that they don't already have. And that's very, very valuable.
I agree with you 100%. I think that for any young person, and I have 4 children. I have, my daughter is 22. You know, I have another one that's 19 and one that's going to be turning 18. I tell all of them, what I want for my kids is to be self-sufficient and be happy, be productive and be ethical, basic things. But you brought up a very good point. I think for when you're young, I don't think you really know exactly what you want to do. I think as you get older and it kind of morphs into something else, but there's a few key questions. And with agriculture, you can be, okay, like what Daniel does. Do you like the outdoors? Do you like working with cows? Do you like more of an outdoor type of lifestyle? Or are you a people person? Do you want to be, you know, talking to people like me all day long and negotiating and doing things like that and meeting people in social things or whatever? I think, you know, if you're into chemistry, you could work for a chemical company. You could do, there's tons of directions to go. I think you have to define really what you want to do, you know, what the opportunities are, where you're going to live. All those things come into play. But first of all, if you like it, you're more likely going to be successful at it. So I would say pick something that you'll enjoy. Pick something that you'll, you know, that is kind of up your, that's a natural thing for you. I think other than that, I think the biggest obstacle to getting hired in agriculture, there's no easy way to put this. Let's just say it's entitlement. I think that, you know, we all started doing, you know, jobs you didn't want to do, but every single one of those was a stepping stone to something else. I mean, I literally, when I got my first sales job, I delivered in a pickup truck garlic salsa to 14 stores. And this was after hours, but I showed the initiative and had a truck with a stallion on it, played the Mexican hat dance, and I had salsa in the back. It was great. But I did it all off hours. I delivered all these stores. And at the end of the day, I got our product into Safeway Tracy through the back door. But it was initiative. It was work ethic. My boss told me, we're not paying you overtime. I'm like, fine, I'll do it on my own. Those are the types of things that get you noticed. Those are the type of things, the work ethic, asking a lot of questions, willing to have drive and go get it. One thing I immediately turns me off, if somebody to me doesn't look like they're aggressively pursuing it, like, oh, they really don't want it. It's just like, well, if you got something, what, you know, bottom line is, if I'm hiring you, at that point, you're not really showing me anything. You're not getting me excited about you. So that to me would be kind of the area I would say for all you guys to focus on.
I would
Thank
just say
you,
one
Daren.
thing real quick. I don't know exactly how to say it in a succinct way other than I don't really work for a living. And what I mean by that is I enjoy what I do to the point to where I'm not home. I'm doing something. I'm clearly not at home, but I wouldn't consider what I do as work. And the reason why I think is because I really enjoy what I'm doing. So I know that there's a lot of factors where you want to live. Not everybody wants to live in the Imperial Valley. I mean, that's just one of those things. People would much rather live in San Diego. But I would say the majority of your waking hours are spent at work. And why would you, regardless of pay or where you live, why would you want to be doing something where you're constantly watching the clock?
Yep.
To me, that's the biggest thing that I'm looking for in my occupation. I don't want to be, I mean, engineering was great. I loved my job probably 90% of the days, which is really good for most people. You know, I really enjoyed it, but I was sitting at my desk and by the time 2:30, 3 o'clock rolled around, I was ready to take off. But working in ag is something that I enjoy so much that I would not consider it work. I would consider it something that I'm called to do, something I really enjoy doing. And of course, I have a thick family history that's done it forever, and there's some family things involved in it. But I would just say, when you're looking for a job, don't look for something that pays the most. Look for something that's fulfilling and something you can see yourself doing for the rest of your life. And I think ultimately, what are you looking for? Are you looking for a paycheck, or are you looking to be happy at work? And so I think that's the biggest thing I would say when it comes to where you're looking to work. And who cares if you enjoy turning a wrench all day, but you could go to college and get a degree, but you hate it. You know, where have you got yourself? So I think just look at, hey, when you're looking for things in high school, look for the things that you enjoy doing already and try moving in that direction. And, you know, life will push you around. You know, you'll land a couple places before you end up somewhere, but that's how it is for everybody. You know, you'll never, and don't be turned off by the first job you get in an industry. You know, I had 3 different engineering jobs when I was at Deere, and they're all vastly different. So if you do end up in agriculture and you end up on the wrong side of a shovel a couple of times, don't think that agriculture is not for you just because you didn't end up exactly where you wanted on the first try.
That's very well said, Daniel. Very well said.
Great. Thank you, 3. Great perspectives. Next, I see Audrey Rose Abatti has a question. Audrey, if you want to unmute yourself and ask the question.
Hi, thank you very much. I kind of have a question, different one for each of the panelists, but they're all kind of surrounded by the current pandemic going on. My first question is for Mr. Hawk, and that is, a lot of your troubles that you said that were caused by the pandemic have a lot to do with the labor. Do you think once the vaccine becomes more widely spread and more people have had it, do you think your work life will kind of go back to normal now that once people are able to kind of close that distance between each other, kind of how it used to be?
You know, I don't know if anybody can tell for sure what's going to happen. I mean, there's been some major trends that have changed, like consumer habits have changed. And I think even cultural changes have happened as far as how close people are willing to get to each other and things. I think in a large sense, and for me, I think a lot of things are going to stay the same. And they have had to kind of stay the same regardless of what's happening, because the agriculture industry can't just change overnight. You know, we do have a pretty robust agricultural industry in the United States, but the infrastructure that we have in place is so expensive. For say, like for instance, I'll just put it in a way like our packing shed. I can't just change the packing shed overnight to accommodate all these things. You know, it just isn't practical, and the cost would be exorbitant. But ultimately, I think that things will kind of roll around and they will end up kind of coming back to normal as far as labor. But as far as like, maybe Daren could speak to it, but sales, you know, a lot of our sales were not necessarily direct to consumer. So we did some food service, and what food service means is that we sell to places like food distribution centers like Cisco, US Foods, places that take large quantities of product and then they distribute it among restaurants and other things. And with the restaurant industry, I mean, that's hurt us, and who knows how that's going to change. But as far as, you know, sales, there's one thing, but as far as labor, I think ultimately that's going to kind of roll around back to normal. But I don't know.
No, I agree. You know, Daniel, I think that, you know, first of all, food service, I read, I forget where it was, but they said in Los Angeles County that 70% of the restaurants that closed, even if it gets back, are not going to reopen. So that's devastating to the economy. It's devastating to all those people that rely upon those jobs. To your point, if you had food service stuff, I think that, you know, those guys got hurt. Not only that, you know, our asparagus grower had some food service contracts of his own, and then it took him the whole year to get his money, and he didn't get all of his money because those guys in turn were going out of business as they couldn't meet their obligations because simply the business wasn't there because they were shut down. So I think that for us being more retail, it's more keeping up with the demand on certain items, and then how do you react to the other items? But to Daniel's point, I think we call it a new normal. I think that in California, you have Silicon Valley. Like my kids, I'm divorced. My kids live in San Jose in the Bay Area. But these big Silicon Valley companies are finding that, hey, you don't have to be in a brick and mortar building. You can be just as effective someplace else. So that's affecting, those markets up there, whether it's a grocery store market, whether, the restaurants obviously are closed, but people are finding that they can go to these different spots, and companies are saying, okay, some of them are even willing to take a pay cut that they don't have to commute an hour and a half a day. So I think it's, first of all, it's a very, very good question. I think all we are doing at this point, and this includes, I had a meeting with the top executives from Safeway, Albertsons, and I asked them, what do we plant? You guys are committed to us on certain items, and they're like, well, our guess is if you take last year and you bump up an additional 15%, we feel like that's where we're going to be. All those same guys originally were talking about going back to work in their offices in January. Now it's out until June. So I think it's still in fluctuation. But no matter which side of the fence you're on, it's very difficult what to judge. You want to be able to meet the needs of your customers. Yet if we turn around and plant tons of stuff and then it goes back to normal, and then all of a sudden we're stuck with it, it's a lot of risk involved. I mean, a lot of risk. But I think, being as it's such a good question, I think all any of us are doing right now is taking an educated guess at best.
Thank you very much. And on that note, sir, I have a lot of questions. You've talked a lot about how you're currently striving to satisfy all your current customers and clients. How are you going about, are you striving to form new contracts with other businesses to provide your services to? How is that managing with the current pandemic and everything kind of shutting down? How do you grow when everything's closing?
Who is that directed at?
You, sir.
Oh, me. Oh, well, I think that, we're not striving for new contracts. I mean, well, we bid on certain contracts every year. Like what we had to do this year, for example, is we had to take these factors into account because, to Daniel's point, all of our costs are increasing. You get a crew that, take corn, for example. You got a big trailer, you got 10 guys on one side, 10 guys on another side. They throw it up on a table. You've got these people packing it all together. That same crew, when you take half the people away, you don't just lose, it's not like you're 50% capacity, you're losing more capacity than that. So your whole structure kind of changes, your cost per unit changes. So we had to go back to some of our contracts and basically ask for help to say, look, what was profitable for us, at least in a small way. And most of the time your contracts are not super, super lucrative. They drive the volume, which drives efficiencies, which basically, they're looking to lock something in, we're looking to lock it in. A lot of them we had to go back and ask for help. And for the most part, I think people were very, very good about that. When the new thing came up, we basically had to factor in these guesses and raise our costs, including minimum wage, including COVID, including, challenges. And most of the challenges are with labor. But the other challenges for retail is that these guys are seeing a huge boom in their business because of the lack of an option being food service. So it's not necessarily new contracts. It's more like restructuring to make sure you're not totally tied up at a loss, is I think maybe a good way to put it. So
That's really
I hope that
interesting.
answers your question.
It does to some extent, and it's cool to notice that between you and Mr. Hawk, a lot of you guys have gone to restructuring your current business to can't think of the word. Well, to deal with the current pandemic and everything going on. And
Yeah.
so I guess my last question is to Miss Sarah Jane. You talked a lot about the beef industry, and from my understanding from your position, you self-manage yourself a lot. So how have you had to change things in your personal job to fit the pandemic going on?
Thank you for that question, Audrey, but I believe, Brea, were you going to say something?
Yes, I was just going to point out that it is a little bit after 2:30 already, so I wanted to check in with the panelists to see if you can stick around for a couple more questions. I think that Alejandra also had a question next, if you guys have a couple more minutes. But I know we might be losing some participants as well if anyone has things scheduled at 2:30, but we are a little bit past our expected end time.
I'm fine.
Are you guys okay?
I got a few more minutes.
I'm good.
Okay, perfect. So we'll get to your question, Audrey, and then we'll go to Alejandra. Sarah?
So Audrey, you asked, how has my role changed? Very, very fortunate in that I usually don't deal with people, okay, which was a must-have in the dream job. I don't really like people, so it makes it very easy to social distance, okay? I only see cows. Every once in a while, I will run into the rancher on his property, and we'll talk, you know, just through the windshield, much like I'm sure Daniel and Daren do with their other growers and friends, and when you're out checking fields and things like that. It has affected our clients more so than, I guess, me, myself, okay, and our salesmen. So I don't have to, I go to the ranch, I go home and go on the computer, okay? I have a great job. It's one of the things I had to have. I would not ever work in an office. I never have. I've been very lucky to find exactly what I was looking for, not working in an office. Okay. For the salesman, everything is about customer relationships, even my job. So I spent a lot more time on the phone than I ever have. And of course, you know, emailing and everything like that, but trying to keep up to date with the ranchers and what's going on and what they're doing and how many cattle they sold here and there and how much feed they're going to need here and there. I don't see them very often, but I do like to see them at least twice a year, you know, because everything that I do, I'm the only person that does it at HiPro. One of the few people that do what I do in Texas, and everything I have relies on my credibility. And it's not like my producers and my clients are going to forget my credibility, but so much of what I do is based on trust and relationships that it is very hard to go a whole year now without seeing some of my clients. I feel very distanced from them, not just physically, but they're only going to tell you so much on the phone. These guys hate talking on the phone. It is a nightmare to try to get them on the phone. They got bad cell reception. It's just a nightmare. And then when that happens, they only call you when they have a problem, as opposed to when you have an open line of communication and see them kind of quarterly. So that's what's affected my job the most. We didn't get to give out, you know, Christmas presents and all of those fun things that we do for clients. So it's just kind of been very heartbreaking. So it's hard to see them when you do see them and they're heartbroken over the drought and the beef prices. And for me, it's hard to stay up to date on all the details. Where have they moved cows from? These places are huge, right? So if I can't ever get a hold of them, I have to start using my best guess on which cows are where on which pastures. If these pastures are 6, 7, 8,000 acres, I can't always find them, okay? Like I don't have a helicopter, I drive around a little pickup. And if I don't know what group of cows is out there and I can't get a hold of the rancher, that means a lot more work for me, which is fine. I just really, really miss seeing my clients.
Thank you, Sarah. I believe Alejandra Barajas has a question. Okay, she put it in the chat. For Daniel, what? Oh. Did you want to speak? Did I hear something? Okay, for Daniel, what tips do you recommend for marketing and sales? Or is this for Daniel or for Daren?
I think that would be for Daren.
Yeah. So for Daren, what tips do you recommend for marketing and sales strategies, and how did this affect your job in the pandemic, or how did the pandemic affect your job?
Well, I think to Sarah's point, I mean, every client I ever got, and we market on the phone, you know, phone, email, stuff like that. You know, we have orders that come across on sales platforms like iTrade and, you know, stuff like that. But every client I ever got, I got by showing up and being there in person. And I mean, to me, that's the biggest thing, is that when you can't go see them, sit down with them face to face and, you know, say, hey, here's who we are, here's what we do, here's, you know, you got to really see, as much as we're in a product business, we're in a people business. So like Sarah, I for enjoyment, I go hunting to the middle of nowhere. I won't see another person. So my enjoyment is what Sarah does for a living. And, you know, that to me, I got to get away from it sometimes. But that's the biggest thing, is that you're so limited on our side from what you can do that really you're having to rely upon past relationships, and you're having to do your best to keep in touch with them and maintain, because Sarah's 100% right. It is 100% relationship driven. That is what it is. So you've got to find creative ways to stay connected. You got to find, a lot of times they'll call you up and ask you, and you just got to be creatively engaged and try to pull as much information as you can and let them know that you're there, and doing personal things. Like I had a client of mine that she was isolated and she just broke down on the phone. And I mean, so I got on Grubhub and I sent her a dinner with a dessert and a bottle of wine, and just do something nice and kind, because we all, we're all under a lot of stress. I didn't see my kids for a year, and those are things that are hard. So I always try to put myself in the other person's shoes and look at it from their perspective and say, okay, what can I do to make it better for them? Because that's what I look at. My joy in what I do is really making people happy and helping people. And that gives me my greatest satisfaction out of my job. And the main person I feel like I help is the grower, but I help the grower by making the best relationships with good buyers that support us the whole way through. So to me, it's a big, it's kind of a big circle that comes around. But I think with the restrictions on travel and being social and stuff like that, because normally we're going out to dinner, we're going to getting a drink, and we're flying to New York and walking the market and checking out the DC and stuff like that. It's being flexible. We had one DC that asked us, hey, can you give us 5 trucks and deliver to stores because the distribution center's being shut down? Sure. Showing creativity, flexibility, adaptability to react to their needs. That's where you could say, okay, I could stand out from a crowd by my willingness to do that. But it's tough because you're just so limited.
I would add one thing. I think everybody here would agree that agriculture is based on loyalty and trust. And that's one thing that I really appreciate about agriculture. There's a lot of big deals that go down with a handshake still in this industry, especially among growers. And as far as it relates to producing for somebody else, I mean, a lot of times we already have seed in the ground before a contract is signed. A lot of times. And while that's probably not always a safe thing, it is something that agriculture heavily relies upon people's word and people's ability to stick to things even when it's not easy. And so I think just being able to develop a relationship with somebody, and I think being there in person really helps. Can I trust this person that I'm going to go ahead and invest all this money to produce a crop for somebody? Are they going to follow through? And so, like Sarah's saying, relationships really are everything, even for me, because I need to make sure that I'm making the right decisions for my business when it involves trusting the right people. Yep. And so, like I said, handshakes still count, and your word still counts for now. But I think just being willing to be a person who's trustworthy goes a long way in the agriculture industry.
I don't even think we have one contract for our growers. I maybe one, but I mean, this is our contract right there, and we've had the same growers since I've been here for 25 years. But that's a very good point. It's the person who produces it has to be able to trust that the person like me has their best interest at heart. Bottom line is, my job is to pay for the crop. That's my job. And by doing that, there's sometimes that you make deals or whatever, or sometimes that you got to suck it up and you got to say, look, we got rained out, but I've got to go buy 5 loads of whatever to cover you, and I'll do that. But I've had those same guys that said, look, I know you took in the shorts this time. How about we bump next week up a couple of bucks above the contract to help you or whatever. That's the trust factor that Daniel's talking about. It's really goes beyond. We try to look at it as nothing we do is transactional. Any grower can have a bad crop. Any grower cannot come up with the best quality. We, on our side, have to be able to deal with it, have to find homes for all the, let's say the cosmetically challenged or whatever. So it really comes down, and then having customers understand, look, what's facing us. Like he said, the crops don't stop because it rains. yet you might not pick for a few days. I might have orders on the books that I can't get covered because we just got rained out. That happened today in Corn and Sinaloa. So I think understanding, communicating, and the trust, and I love that Daniel brought that up, because really the trust comes down all the way from the field to the guy buying it in his DC. It's a long chain that's in the middle of that, at least from the produce side.
Thank you. Thank you for those answers. We are just after 2:45 now, so unless anyone has any last questions that you're just itching at getting answered, I think we've answered everything in the chat. I just want to thank once again our 3 panelists. I really appreciated the input and perspective that the 3 of you provided today. And thank you to the students and the teachers who participated today and listened in on our session and asked some great questions. And once again, thank you to IVROP and FarmSmart for putting today together, as well as the tours that are going to be happening over the next couple weeks. Did you guys have anything you wanted to close with?
Sarah,
Stacey,
nice to meet
Stephanie,
you. That's it. Sorry, didn't mean to cut somebody off there.
No worries. I just wanted to thank you once again, Sarah Jane, Daniel, and Mr. Are you also Daniel? No.
No, Daren Van Dyke.
Daren. And Brea for being the moderator, and UC FarmSmart for hosting us, and students, teachers, thank you for being here. We hope that you enjoyed it as much as we did. We hope to see you next week at the same time on the same Zoom link.
I'd like to close with one thing for all the students out there. Believe in yourself. Believe in yourself. You do that, there is nothing that you cannot accomplish. But it starts with you. If you believe you can do it, you're willing to work hard enough to get it, you're going to show that initiative, you guys can accomplish whatever it is you decide to accomplish. But it starts with your own belief and your own work ethic.
Amen to that, Daren. Thank you guys so much for having me. I believe that the IVROP has all of our contact information. Happy to answer any questions at any time.
No, I think you guys got my email and stuff. So if something comes up, if anybody has a question, they can always shoot it to me or whatever. I'd be more than happy to answer.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Nice to meet you guys. Sarah, Daniel, guys. Nice
thank you guys.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you and have a great day, everyone. Take care.